What is yourself? Definition of yourself. How would you describe who you are? Describe yourself. What is self-identity? What is self? So many questions that most of the people living on this planet never ever ask themselves in this cycle from birth to death. Never. They pass through this cycle from birth to death without ever asking the most important question of self-identity. Who are you really? And what is the main reason for that is that from the moment we come out of the womb, the pressure from the society that we are born into is to put the attention outside of ourselves, outside. Always look outside, always focus on the outside. Never really focus on the inside. And so we go on through our life always like this, putting our attention on the outside. We identify ourselves as a certain name, as a certain body-mind, as a certain characteristics of this body-mind, everything that is on the outside. This body-mind, this body is on the outside. And yet it is not really important. Whatever shape it is, whatever color it is, whatever characteristics it has as a body, whatever characteristics it has as a mind, as a brain, as a working brain, it doesn't really matter at all. What matters is what is inside, and yet we never really focus on the inside, we always focus on the outside. That's why most of our experience is the experience of the so-called outside world, the material outside world that we live in, the body-mind that we inhabit. This is where most of our experience comes from, because we focus our mind solely on the outside. What would happen if we reverse that, if we focus our attention on the inside? What would happen is actually quite miraculous. We would discover different levels of consciousness. We would discover different realities. We would discover that so-called material reality that we think is sort of the reality, and we think that even it's the only reality, not just the reality, it's just one of the different levels of consciousness, one of the different levels of awareness. The reality is what we put our focus on, what we put our attention on. If we put our attention on this outside world, including the body-mind that is outside, that is our reality, that is where our awareness is. But if we shift our awareness inside, if we put our awareness on ourself, which is inside, which actually inhabits this body, then we would discover other realities. That is just how it is. It is just as simple as that. And it's really tragic in a way that we live as human beings not really understanding where we are. Where are we? Where are you really? I mean, can you point where you are? Are you sort of this sort of a body? So if you cut off your hand and give me your hand, would you give me part of you, part of yourself? Would it be less of you if you cut your hand off? So are you just this flesh and bones and blood and nerves and whatever else it is that makes this contraption of this body? I mean, it would be the ridiculous to really think so, wouldn't it? And yet, I mean, so many of us living in this so-called material world that we experience as real and that we experience as the only reality, actually think, tragically and funnily enough, that we are this body, that we are this body-mind with the brain that does its job and produces the thoughts, you know? what would you call that? What would you call that? Ignorance? Being misguided? Living in an illusion? I mean, whatever you call it, it's you can always get out of it. You can always turn your attention from the outside to the inside and change all that. And when you think about it, you already have the experiences of other worlds inside you, so you just need to focus a little bit more on that. There is the self, your self, myself, ourselves, self that lives inside the body, that sort of inhabits this body. And when we put awareness on it, when we focus on it, we experience an unbelievable expansion of what the reality is, what the experience of reality is, what realities we can experience, all the different levels of consciousness. And we stop identifying ourselves with the outside body, with the outside body mind, with the outside world. And we start expanding our awareness, and we start expanding our understanding of what is self-identity. Why would we do that? Why would you do that, really? I mean, if you're happy enough the way you are now, identifying yourself with this body and identifying yourself with this world that you live in, I mean, that's okay. Then you don't need to do anything. Then you just leave your attention where it is in the outside world. But if you've come to realization that in this so-called outside material world, in this body that will die one day, that is deteriorating all the time, there is no true happiness to be found. There is no bliss to be found. Everything is always up and down and up and down and changing. Then you need to take your attention from the outside and put it into inside. Turn it inwards. Turn it onto the self. Start experiencing the self and identify yourself with the self, not with the body, not with the world, material world that seems to be. And everything changes with it. And the changes that you will experience, in your everyday sort of so-called reality are absolutely wonderful. For one, you will understand that the self, your true self, is not limited to this body. It's not limited to this cycle from birth to death. You will stop fearing death because the self does not die. It is only the body that dies. And there are so many other things that will come with it, so many other experiences that will come in with it. You just go with your experience, trust your experience, and shift your focus from the outside to the inside. Why not? Talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.